Often when you start playing a new game, you will be met with a tutorial on how to play the game. These can range from pretty good to just straight up disasters that make you not want to play the game anymore. What makes these tutorials so bad, and which ones do I hate the most? Let's take a look at some of the worst tutorials I have ever encountered, and what ruined not only the tutorial experience, but often even the games they were for. Do you remember playing the Valorant tutorial? What about Overwatch? I completely forgot about these tutorials because they seem to be so disconnected from the actual games they are a part of. Regardless, you are heavily incentivized, if not straight up forced, to play these tutorials for competitive games. Now, I somewhat understand having to play a tutorial for League of Legends, for example, since there are pretty much only 3 popular MOBA games. So it is more than likely that you haven't played a MOBA before starting League. It should still be skippable, but at least I do understand the reasoning. But there are millions of FPS games, all with the same mechanics, and they were here for years, if not decades. So what is the point of forcing players to play a tutorial for Valorant? And as for Riot standards, why doesn't TFT have a tutorial? That game is way more unique. In the end, all of these games are competitive games, and even though you want a casual fanbase, of course, there is no reason to have an unskippable tutorial for the most popular game genre that has been around since forever. What is there to say about the tutorial for Driver? This is the most notorious tutorial in all of gaming, and it's for a very good reason. The game puts you into a garage with a shopping list, a to-do list of tricks you need to complete. No explanation, no nothing. Just a very tight time limit, your interpretation of the tricks on the list, a car, and a condition that you cannot crash at all during this tutorial. Keep in mind, this game came out in 1999, when this type of games, or games in general, were nowhere near as popular as today. This is absolutely the most insane tutorial in the gaming history. I have mentioned previously that I enjoy racing games, and that includes Gran Turismo. It is not my favorite title from this genre, but I can say with confidence that these games became popular for a good reason, being very good racing games. But there is one thing I cannot defend, even in the original game, and that is the topic of this video, the Gran Turismo tutorial. It's not the worst offender on the list, but this tutorial has many fundamental issues that bothered me when playing the game. First of all, you need to complete the tutorials, or the driving license tests, as they are called in the game, to unlock more races and generally to progress through the game. Because obviously as a professional driver you need driving license tests. These tests start off very easy, being more of an inconvenience than a real challenge, but they slowly get more and more difficult, to the point where some of the last ones resemble more of a genuine speedrunning map rather than a general tutorial for the racing to come after. My main problem with this is that the game is marketed as a racing against other players type game, and that's mostly what it is. But these tests create a separate speedrunning racing game that is not treated as an extra mode or another option, but as a requirement to participate in the base game. Overall, not the worst. I am a big fan of Trackmania, so it didn't ruin my experience from this game completely, but it does feel quite out of place. Now, I don't hate Assassin's Creed, but it's not my favorite game series. And as for tutorials, well, those have been underwhelming since the first game, being very monotone and boring, explaining the very basics of video games. But at least it's not AC free. Assassin's Creed 3 is almost more of a tutorial than it is a game. It's extremely long, to the point that by the time you're done, you might not even realize that the actual game has started. Clearly, the intent here was to make the game's tutorial story-driven, but teaching you the most basic mechanics for over 4 hours is just ridiculous. The silver lining here is that after this entry, the developers decided to go with a much more normal path for tutorials in their next games. During the research for this video, I stumbled upon a game called Jet Set Radio. I didn't think much of it at first, but it kept appearing in these lists, so I decided to give it a try, and oh man, trust me when I say the placement is very much valid. No matter how good at games you are, when you start up a new game, especially from a genre you haven't played before, you would expect the tutorial to slowly adapt you to the given game. Unless it's Dark Souls, but when you boot up that game, you know what you're getting yourself into. But Jet Set Radio developers were not fans of this idea. The tutorial for this game might as well be another hard difficulty level. You might expect a few lessons introducing you to the game, but the tutorial has a grand total of 22 lessons that need to be completed. The first few parts start off easy enough, teaching the player basic movement and mechanics, and progressively getting more difficult, but the final test of the tutorial challenges the player to perform 50 tricks in a row without touching the ground or breaking the combo, which is an insane task for a new player. And as a result, only around 4% of Steam players have even completed the damn tutorial. In conclusion, tutorials are a very hard part of games to get right, but even if you're playing a boring tutorial sequence, you can remember these ones and be glad you're not stuck playing these. The gaming industry is constantly evolving, and even though tutorials might still be lacking today, we are moving in the right direction, and soon enough, we might have good engaging tutorials in our games. Or not, who really knows?